Welcome everyone to today's podcast. My name is Paul in Peter in Scotland. I am a recovered addict. I'm a happy member of CA. Really pleased to have been joined this morning by Arthur.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. My name's Arthur and I'm a recovered addict and I'm calling from Luton today. It's great to be here and thank you for having me on the podcast, Paul.
I'm really pleased you're here with us today. Yeah, there is a solution to anyone that's still drinking and drugging. Or anyone that's drifting. We absolutely have a solution. It is a design for living. It does work in rough going, believe me. So without further ado, today's podcast that we're going to be, the topic that we're going to be discussing today is why do I keep relapsing? So we're going to bring our experience working with others and our personal experience and knowledge of the literature to bear on the topic. So yeah, I mean, it's something I have a lot of experience of, Arthur, thankfully, some time ago, but I like to think it gives me some insight. I suppose the first thing I want to say is, that hindsight's a wonderful thing. So if you're listening to this broadcast and you're still drinking and drugging, keep coming to meetings, reach out wherever you see this broadcast posted on WhatsApp, Skype in the rooms, or indeed on YouTube. Get involved, come to some meetings, get into these wonderful 12 steps. Yeah, I mean, hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it, Arthur? But we don't know what we don't know. We went through various experiences and it was what it was. And we didn't have the knowledge and the resources and the support of the fellowship that we have today, did we, It's a wonderful thing to learn to live clean, and it's absolutely a process, not an event. What do you think?
Yeah, sorry, Paul. I had my phone on mute then. Yeah, absolutely. It's a beautiful process to be. I just still wake up and it's a miracle that I'm sober. And I remember coming in and out of 12-step fellowship and not being able to grasp this thing, and always trying to get something, but. Truth be told, it wasn't until I realised I had to give to get. So I had to give myself over to this program. I had to give myself over to a power greater than myself. And relapse is a part of my story. It's not a part of recovery. It's not a part of my recovery this time either, but it's a part of my story. And, I met you last year, Paul, on the meeting online, and I was in a terrible way. And, from the spirit of the fellowship, basically the meetings, I got 100 days, but there was things I still wasn't willing to do because I wasn't broken enough at that point, and I wasn't ready, should I say. And when I was ready, this stuff just took off, and beautiful process.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the first nip of the ringer, as it says in the literature, and many of us have to be badly mangled. I often call it, Arthur, a conspiracy of circumstances, whether it's financial, marital, industrial, as in work, physical or mental. Various things happen to us, or our response to those various things give us the desire to get clean, and furthermore give us the desire to remain clean. These are complex issues, I'd say, and one of the things about regular meetings and having a home group is you're reminded of the problem, and therefore you're reminded of the need for a solution. Made aware of the solution. What my experience has been is it's easy to become self-centered again, in abstinence, and ultimately begin to rely on self rather than God.
Yes, absolutely. And actually, that's what I've asked you if I can bring a couple of topics up today out of the big book to do that with, and absolutely, because I completely agree with that as well, around relying on self and that self-reliance, where that fear creeps in, and not relying on God and Father, and for me, that's what happened over time and time again. It was all self-reliance and the obsession, the great obsession that one day I'll beat the game. I'm sure many people can relate to that, and it took a number of years for me to realise that actually I can't do anything about my problem. God can, and I need to just follow a few simple rules, as it says in the doctor's opinion. That's all I've got to do. Follow. Yeah.
We'll come to the book in a second. And you and me was just talking before the meeting. You know, the essence, in my experience and opinion, of drug addiction is the lust of the flesh, the phenomenon of craving. And you know, we talk about the purely mental twist, and there's almost like a muscle memory of the physical feelings produced from drunkenness. And I've come to see that a hit on a pipe, right, a spoon or foil or split, it's all drunkenness. And I find that helpful, Arthur, because particularly since my favourite book on recovery is the book Alcoholics Anonymous, the big book, A Drunken State, you know, and ultimately it's self-gratification. It's not dissimilar to the desire for food or sex or tobacco. It's the bodily craving, you know, for substances, you know, and closely followed by the mental obsession. Anyway, we have a glorious topic today. Why do I keep relapsing? And I'd like to put on the screen. Do you want me to put up page 5 for starter?
That'd be brilliant. Thank you, Paul. Yes. Okay, so I was just going to read from Gradually Things Got Worse, about halfway down the page there. So, gradually things got worse. The house was taken over by the mortgage holder. My mother-in-law died. My wife and father-in-law became ill. Then I got a promising business opportunity. Stocks were at a low point of 1932, and I had somehow formed a group to buy. I was to share generously in the profits. Then I went on a prestigious bender, and the chance vanished. I woke up. This had to be stopped. I saw I could not so much as take one drink. I was free forever. Before then, I had written lots of sweet promises, but my wife happily observed that this time I meant business, and so I did. Shortly afterward, I came home drunk. There had been no fight. Where had been my high resolve? I simply didn't know. It hadn't even come to mind. Someone had pushed a drink my way, and I had taken it. Was I crazy? I began to wonder, for such an appalling lack of perspective seemed near being just that. Renewing my resolve, I tried again. Some time passed, and the confidence began to be replaced by cocksureness. I could laugh at the gym meals. Now I had what it takes. One day I walked into a cafe to telephone. In no time, I was beating on the bar, asking myself how it happened. As the whiskey rose to my head, I told myself I would manage better next time, but I might as well get good and drunk then, and I did. The remorse, horror, and hopelessness of the next morning are unforgettable. The courage to do battle was not there. My brain raced uncontrollably, and there was a terrible sense of impending calamity. I hardly dared cross the street lest I collapse and be run down by an early morning truck through scarcely daylight. An all-night place supplied me with a dozen glasses of ale. My writhing nerves were stilled at last. A morning paper told me that the market had gone to hell again. Well, so had I. The market would recover, but I wouldn't. That was a hard thought. Should I kill myself? No, not now. Then a mental fog settled down. Gin would fix that. So 2 bottles and oblivion. Yeah. I mean, that page sort of speaks for itself, really. It's just in the that circle of pain and relying on self to beat the game. And I know that so well, that self-reliance, thinking that I can do something about this, me on my own power. And it says gradually things got worse. It was like, as I went through my drinking and my drug using, things got incrementally worse. Sort of every couple of months, sometimes every week, something got worse and it became my new reality. And it was like me saying, well, at least I'm not that bad yet, looking, one step down. At least I'm not that bad. When I get there, at least I'm not the next step down that bad, And so these things became my new normal. And as I got to the very bottom of my drinking and drugging, and I look back at where I started, it's a long way. It's, I've stepped down a long way. And it's that gradual, pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization, Pitiful meaning, people feel sorry for me. They see me, I used to be a good lad, and I'm now, you know, at that time I was, you know, getting into crack cocaine and, you know, doing things to get that, you know, doing criminality to get that. And so pitiful, people start to feel sorry for me because the way I am, the way I look, the way I smell, you can smell me coming. And then, you know, incomprehensible, meaning I don't know what's going on. I can't even comprehend what's happening around me. I don't even know my reality. So warped through drinking drugs, through my altered states, that I don't, I'm not even comprehending what's happening. And demoralization, just in absolute pain and agony all the time, and really not knowing what's wrong with me.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on, Paul. Go on.
Well, the futility, you know, the first half of step one, the powerlessness, you know, over drugs, over addiction, you know, the futility of the next one, you know the score, Arthur. Where can I get a bit extra? Will he give me a $5? Will he give me 3 for 25? You know, if I can just flog this last bit, I can do this, go there, buy that, sell this. You know, just insanity.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the next one, you know, living to use, using to live, ways and means to get more. You know, we have a solution, and you know, that solution is faith and trust in God. You know, the steps are about being suitable and agreeable to God, and ultimately learning to live a life of prayer and faith and helping others. You know, that's largely how I see it today. You know, and I make no bones about it. And you know, that power comes through cleaning house, trusting God, and helping others. You know, I've seen it time and time again. And you know, the mystery of how I'm able to be responsible today, Arthur. You know, and it's just the grace and mercy of God. You know, I'm absolutely sure of it. It's a great bit of the book, it really is. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well,
I was just going to say, you could see in just, I think it's, how many times he started and stopped here? About 3 or 4 times in less than a page. I think it's 3 times he's tried to stop and started again, or at least twice. Yeah. And again, it's this reliance on self. He says, my confidence began to be replaced by cocksureness. I could laugh at the gym meals. Now I had what it takes. And one day, he has this strange mental blank spot. One day I walked into a cafe to telephone. In no time, I was beating on the bar, asking myself how it happened. And that's, you know, the last time I had a relapse, or I used again, shall I say, you know, it took me out there for 8.5 months. And I didn't wake up planning on doing that day. You know, I did not plan on waking up, and, you know, I didn't plan, that wasn't what I set out to do that day. But that strange mental blank spot happened. I had no defense against the first drink. I was in complete self, and, you know, that's what happened. And the beauty of this program is I get, you know, God's power.
Absolutely. You know, about 3 times a week, I would say, Arthur, I'm asked the question, I don't know why I picked up again, or literally, why did I pick up again? You know, I would say on average 3 times every week, you know, for quite a long time. And, you know, folks want an answer, you know, and my usual answer is, well, you like getting high. You like the effects produced, mate. Oh, well, I don't. Well, you do, otherwise you wouldn't do it. You know, and there's also the ease and comfort, and there's the escapism, there's euphoric recall, glad, bad, mad, or sad. You know, an addict that's not using drinking drugs without a daily program action is like a fish out of water, gasping for air. You know, and only the oxygen of prayer, the oxygen of God's presence, you know, is going to keep that addict in any way manageable, you know. You know, beating on the bar, why did I do it? You know, well, discontent, despair, depression, isolation, all these things feed into it, and I would say half the folk I talk to, Arthur, in the real world, they've got complex issues.
Mm.
They've got mental problems, physical problems, domestic problems, criminal problems, problems with their body and their drugging, internal and external, depression, angst. Some of these folk need a lot of help. Now, if anyone's listening to this, I absolutely believe in permanent sobriety. I really do. One time. It's the mystery of divine sovereignty and human responsibility. A man said to me a couple of years ago, Arthur, "Oh, I don't like how God gets to pick and choose who stays clean and who dies or who doesn't." Well, there's the element of human responsibility. Once we're clean, we've got a window of, we get a moment of clarity, a window of opportunity, and then the grace of God to get into action. The thing is, it is an action program. Pray and then take action. And I'll leave with this because I want to take us to another page in the book. I very much enjoyed what you brought to the table on this topic, and I know we've each got 2 or 3 topics each. The mystery is that we then take action in God's power, and we get free, don't we? The obsessions removed, and then we to learn how to live clean and stay free from the bedevilment, don't we, and the delusion.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, and this program really works. And what you just said there as well about personal responsibility, I believe that's absolutely true. That personal responsibility now, now we are clean and we get a bit of clean time. It's not even about the time; it's the one day at a time thing you just said there as well. But that personal responsibility, and thank God there's a God, so we can have connection to Him, and thank God for sponsors as well, so we can have accountability. Because I need my thinking, my behaviours. Quite often needs accountability. I need to talk to my sponsor and tell him what's going on, and have that responsibility there as well, and also responsibility to be able to pass the message on, that this stuff works. There is a solution.
Absolutely. So I've got a bit in the book here on page 3. My drinking assumed more serious proportions, Arthur. 2 ounces of brown instead of 1. Trying to have half of it flogged before I got back so I could plan the next excursion for more. Perhaps I'll be able to handle half a teent in the spoon. You know how it goes, Arthur. The insanity of being in that cycle. The instant ease and comfort, the instant drunkenness. Now we here. And the gravity of the situation, how important it is to take action. Here's Bill here. He went on for no real employment for 5 years. He hardly drew a sober breath. Sometimes folks say, "Oh, you're too militant, you're too full on about recovery." This is a life or death difference. Every 8 seconds or so, an alcoholic addict somewhere around the world takes their last breath while we're taking our next breath. We have an opportunity to have a better future, and it begins today. And then the despair of those around us. You mentioned it earlier, Arthur. His wife would come home exhausted to find him drunk. So the futility of it, and you mentioned it earlier, resolve. This is it, but it wasn't. He went through various circumstances and consequences, but couldn't start. Bill was a proper alcoholic addict. He really was. He meant business. This is the page you mentioned as well, Arthur. It's also one of the pages I chose. you know, where was his high result? Someone pushed a drink his way. And it's ironic that later on, is it Ebby that comes to see Bill across the kitchen table? Who's that?
That's Abby, yes.
Yeah. And Ebby offers him his solution across the table. And what does Bill do? Bill offers him his solution. Bill pushes a drink across the table to him.
Mm.
Well, before that, here, someone does that with Bill, and he took the drink. And we know when we take a drink, the drink takes a drink, and the drink takes us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's that first one that ruins everything. You know, and that's why in AA they talk greatly about staying away from the first one, particularly since alcohol is the drug of choice. You know, the social acceptability and availability of the substance and the drug alcohol. But it's just as important for us to stay away from that first one, whatever the substance is. And so the inability. I suppose my point, Arthur, is the inability to resist the first one comes primarily because of lack of ongoing responsible fellowship with God. And so the attempt to snare alcoholism is such an appealing temptation because we don't have something better in place. We don't have a working, practical connection with God. What do you think?
Absolutely, yeah. And it's a disconnection to God. It's a disconnection, I believe, it's a disconnection to God, to others, and to the true self as well, which is connected to God. You know, the spirit and the conscience. And you read out that bit there on page 3 about my drinking assumed more serious proportions, continuing all day and almost every night. Just after that, it says the remonstrances, which are the remainder, I believe, the remainder of my friends terminated in a row, and I became a lone wolf. So that's what happens to a lot of folk. You know, that's what happens to a lot of people with this illness, and it happened to me. The remonstrances, so the last of my friends terminated in a row, and I became a lone wolf. And if I look back through the years of, just for example, I know New Year's Eve's coming up soon, and for example, New Year's Eve, every New Year's Eve for the past near 10 years, has just incrementally got gradually worse and worse. The places have got more sordid. The people have got, you know, the people I'm hanging out with have got a bit more criminal about them. I'd say that to the end where I wasn't, you know, I was on my own. And became a lone wolf, and yeah, there was just this sort of this not knowing, this incomprehensible. I said a minute ago, that incomprehensible demoralization, and you know, you brought up the topic about how well, you said about how, you know, we drink and use because we love it, you know, and I used to drink and use because I loved it, because I have an illness that, you know, as well. And yeah, so we need a program of action to at least match that, if not, you know, be more than that. It has to be stronger than drinking drugs and the need to do it. And I think where I went wrong a lot of times as well is I was comparing my sobriety and what life was like sober without a program to, you know, a bottle of vodka and a line of cocaine. I was comparing that dopamine hit of that to sobriety, and it's not, you know, sobriety is more like a slow rise, you know, it's like a slow rise on a hill, whereas, you know, drinking and drugging is just a roller coaster, and, you know, hormones and all sorts of stuff's going on when I'm taking drink and drugs. But sobriety for me is just contentment and peace, especially, you know, in dependence upon God.
That's so beautiful. And that's what we must do every morning, Arthur, isn't it? You know, in step 1, 2, 3, God, I'm an alcoholic addict. Give me power. Please keep me sober today. Grant me wisdom, serenity, and courage this day as I go forth to do your will. Give me an intuitive thought. It's page isn't it, on awakening. To step 1, 2, 3 in the morning takes a very short amount of time. And what you're doing is you're honoring God. You're saying, God, I believe you can do this. You're exercising faith. Elsewhere it's written that, it's impossible to please God without faith. And faith must work through us 24 hours a day. Otherwise we use again, and to use is to die. And faith without works is dead. So we ask and we receive, we seek and we find. And, we learn to, I've heard it said, every addict wakes up with untreated alcoholism. If you don't treat it, it will treat you. Maybe not with drink and drugs to start with, but untreated alcoholism is an awful thing. So I just wanted to very briefly say what working proper fellowship with God looks like. Well, you begin the day as I've just described with a 1, 2, 3, and then you have things in place during that day that you'll be maintaining, reasonably sane and manageable in, like a commitment to literature and a home group, some accountability you've mentioned, Stepwork, personal spiritual literature, ringing folk up in recovery. These are very simple things to do that cost nothing, that are indeed the building blocks to a better future, and not having those things in place would be the reason why I would pick up again, Arthur. That's the truth. See? The next topic I wanted to move on to, if I may, is what's mentioned here, failing to enlarge on our spiritual journey.
Yep.
It's on the page, see it. Oh, there it is at the bottom. There. See if it'll highlight. Right, when you want it to, it won't. But he failed to enlarge on his spiritual life. What does that mean? Well, this is one of the reasons, I suppose, it's what's just been described. But failing to have a spiritual life. What is spiritual mean? Well, it's internal of the spirit. It's relating to that which is unseen. Elsewhere it's written that which is seen is temporary, that which is unseen is eternal. We trust in God who you can't physically see at the present time. And so that which is spirit cannot be seen, but is most assuredly here. You can't see the wind, but you can see its effects. You can't see electricity, but I'm quite sure anyone listening to this is doing so as a direct result of electricity. You can't see gravity. You'd be floating off if it weren't for gravity. Well, thus it is with faith and trust in God, and we have to enlarge on our spiritual journey. So for many of us, that involves reading spiritual literature, and I suppose from one perspective, Arthur, these are sort of extra things that we do to keep ourselves sane and spiritually fit that are not directly connected with the 12 steps or the literature, and it's very important to be committed to find, I always say to folks, find yourself 1 or 2 books that are, spiritual literature, and there's tens of thousands of people now. Find one, have a glance through it, and if you like it, commit to reading it. Don't just dip into it. Systematically read it from start to finish, and decide in the first day or 2 if you want to read it or not. And if you don't, get another one and commit to it. Read the thing, get some consistency and commitment going. And if you do that with the other suggestions, then you will remain sober. It is a design for living that works in your going.
Yeah, absolutely it is. It is a design for living that works in rough going, and I'm glad you brought this topic up, actually, page 35, because it says there, he says, we told him what we knew of alcoholism, mind, body, spirit, I presume. That's step 1. And the answer that we had found, that's step 2. He made a beginning, step 3. Then his family was reassembled and he began to work as a salesman for the business he lost through his drinking. All went well for a time, but he failed to enlarge on his spiritual life. Steps 4 to 12. To his consternation, which I believe means dismay or distress, he found himself drunk half a dozen times in rapid succession. And that's what I'd done for years as well. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 out, 1, 2, 3. And it wasn't until I went through the whole process of the 12 steps, and like you said just now as well, working them as a daily part of my life, you know, and it's no longer a chore even now, Paul, you know, to get up in the morning and do my prayers and meditation, and like you say, pages 80, 86 to 88, and then I'll go and read 84 to 85 and do that 1, 2, 3 in the morning, because I wake up with untreated alcoholism, you know, every morning, and I need to get that treated through God, because otherwise it will get treated another way, and that's not the way that I want. And so, yeah, that speaks volumes for itself. I think that portion you just brought up there is, you know, fail to enlarge on his spiritual life. I think there's a warning. Page 14, Bill says something like that about failing to enlarge spiritual life as well. You think you just brought it up, that if we don't enlarge on our spiritual life and don't help constant work with others, you know, we're going to find it hard to get through the certain trials ahead, you know.
Yes. There it is. There's page 14 there, Arthur, my friend. Down at the bottom, is that what you're referring to? Emphasize the absolute necessity of demonstrating these principles in all my affairs. Particularly, it was imperative to work with others. Faith without works was dead. Oh, there
That's
it is.
it.
For only truth the alcoholic proved. An alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others. He couldn't survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. If he didn't work, he would surely drink, and if he drank, he would surely die. Then faith would be dead indeed. With us, it is just like that. Yes.
Absolutely. That's
What's
it. And
Arthur is great minds think alike. The common solution, because I had written down 35 and 14 together for my topic, but I'd waffled on so long I thought I would go straight to Doc's opinion. It's amazing you should mention that. So that's what I've written down next to.
there you go.
So shall I the Doc's opinion for your next topic?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I believe it's pages X, XV, I, which is Roman numeral 28. And comes onto the topic you were talking about earlier, Paul, actually. At the bottom there, men and women drink essentially because they like. I scratched that and put love, the effect produced by alcohol. This sensation is so elusive that while they admit alcohol is injurious, they cannot, after a time, differentiate the true from the false. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. They are restless, irritable, and discontented, unless they can again experience the sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks which they see others taking with impunity. After they have succumbed to the desire again, as so many do, then the phenomenon of craving develops, and they pass through the well-known stages of the spree, emerging remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again. This is repeated over and over, unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, spiritual experience. There is very little hope of his recovery. On the other hand, and strange as this may seem to those who do not understand, once a psychic change, spiritual experience has occurred, the very same person who seemed doomed, which is walking around in a body that won't die and mind that wants to be dead, who had so many problems he despaired of ever solving them, suddenly finds himself easily able to control his desire for alcohol, the only effort necessary being that required to follow a few simple rules. What are the rules? The steps. That's it. The steps and the suggestions of your sponsor. And yeah, I mean, I spoke earlier about the alcoholic life only seems a normal one, you know, incrementally as time went on, my new reality, you know, the new reality became worse and worse and worse, but I'd sit in it for a while. It became a new reality. Haven't done this yet. I'll go and do that. It got worse. That became a new reality. And I can't differentiate the true from the false. You know, I don't understand that I've got a problem. I think my alcoholic addict life is the only normal one. And it says next on page XXIX, sorry, it says the sense of ease and comfort. So the sense, it's like, you know, it becomes a sense. I do it so much that it becomes like touch, taste, you know, smell, sight, hearing. It becomes a sense because I I'm so maladjusted to life that I love the effect produced by alcohol because it takes me out of myself. And like you said a minute ago, Paul, I take a drink or a drug, the drink takes a drink or a drug, and the drink or drug takes me, and I'm off and running. All bets are off. I'm off to the races. And yeah, that phenomenon of craving. See, I understood, sort of got that part when I came into 12-step fellowships. I got that bit. It was the bit preceding that actually, and the not understanding that I don't have the power to not take that first one. I need to get power in my life, and that's what this book is about. It says it in, there is a solution, I believe. This is what the book is about. It's about getting connected to God, the power which can relieve us of our alcoholism, daily reprieve.
Yes, indeed. Yes, whilst I understand what you're saying, I think you read it earlier, Arthur, that you're easily able to control. There it is in the middle of the page there. You're easily able to control your desire for drugs. Can you see that? Once you've had this
Yes, yes,
you see. So
yes.
that's the mystery of it, you see. If you follow a few simple rules. Now, in my opinion, it's not referring to steps there. It's referring to the whole program of action, which definitely involves the steps, don't misunderstand me. But I think it's more than that. I think it's things like a home group, face-to-face home group. I think it's on awakening. I think it's the whole program. I think it's what you do on a daily basis. I think it's service, unity, and taking responsible, and ultimately standing on your own 2 feet in the power of God. I think that's what's in view there. The general principles of a program of action. And it's such an awful thing to think that, that, as I say, every sort of 8 or 10 seconds, so that's probably eight every minute, which is 480 every hour. So that's like 10,000 persons every day are withering from alcoholism, from addiction. That's the truth, in a world of 8,000 million. And the problem is, it's this business of the mental obsession and the physical craving, the phenomena of craving. And so folks keep relapsing because of the physical cravings that only God can solve. So if anyone's listening to this and they're still drinking and drugging, one is locked in that cycle of addiction where the body dictates to the mind. See, the problem of the mind of the addict is the mind says, well, it'll just be one. It's a subtle delusion. And the antidote for delusion is a relationship with God, you see, and an ongoing spiritual experience with God through meetings, literature, service, connection, Stepwork. And what happens is we are maintained sane, sober, and prudent. So there's no desire to drink and drug because it's not a worthwhile solution, because you've got clarity and serenity, and you see the need to maintain fit spiritual condition. And a fit spiritual condition often means I look at step one and I recognize that whilst my mind might like the effects produced, my mind doesn't like the consequences produced. And it's that subtle delusion that I can have the effects produced without the consequences produced. See? And so it's self-deceit, and it's often said denial. It's not just the river in Egypt. If you slice an addict open, you'll find the river of denial running right through them. And that's why step one is so vital. What is step one? Well, it's transparency and accountability about the reality of my life on drugs, Arthur. That's what step one is, and here's my consequences. By working with others, I share them, several times a week. And that's what it looks like, and that's untenable. It's futile and unmanageable. So therefore, the solution. What is the solution? Well, it's faith and trust, which are the principles of step two. Open-mindedness, and then, as you wonderfully described earlier, willingness in step three, and then cleaning house. But I love this portion of the literature that we brought up.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, those few simple rules. Yeah, it's the suggestions from the sponsor, which should be something like what you said there. You know, home group, service, unity, reaching out. Those suggestions, you know, and also, of course, the steps. And it says just before that, it says suddenly, you know, it says suddenly finds himself easily able to control his desire for alcohol. And that's what, you know, suddenly is a frame of time. And suddenly happened for me as well. When I went through this process, suddenly it became easy to say no, you know, when I had power in my life. You know, change. You say it often in the meeting. Change a thought, move a muscle, get into action, and that's what this is about. It's about getting into action. It's a daily program of action. And yeah, admitting that powerlessness in step one, and that I've got a problem. And you spoke about the consequences as well. Yeah, that delusion, the great delusion that one day I can control it, and that it's going to be like that time that I had a wrap of cocaine, had 3 pints down the pub, went home, got to sleep, and woke up for work. That one time 10 years ago, you know, I believe that it'll happen again. And if I could sum up my addiction in one sort of phrase, you know, my using time in addiction, it would be buying the lie that I can, you know, manage well this time with drinking drugs, and it's going to be all right. And you're right, the consequences got far worse, and that became my new reality. I couldn't see the truth from the false, and it's not like that today. It's really not like that today at all. And that's through the power of God and the power of the program, and the power of unity and the power of service. Yeah,
Absolutely. Yes, I think it's, you know, personal responsibility. Once we have that moment of clarity, we then have a window of opportunity, and only the oxygen of a relationship with God is going to empower you to have the willingness to continue in the process of action, and maintain your freedom through action. You know, the mind of an addict convinces himself that he can think his way out of it or talk his way out of it, but actually we have to live our way out of it, and we live our way into right thinking. You know, and many times, you know, persons will say, "Oh, well, I think this or I feel that," you know, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do today? What am I going to do today? You know, by taking certain steps today, you know, I'll have an ongoing. When I used and drank alcohol, it wasn't once a day or twice a week. It was throughout the day. You know, I had very responsible jobs with a stash full of drugs in my pocket. You know, and you know, that is the disease of addiction. You know, so elusive it is that at all of the costs addicts continue to use. You know, and the thing is about step one. You know, if I've truly admitted that it's unmanageable, then it's unmanageable, period. If I pick up again, I'm actually deceiving myself and saying, no, actually, you know what, it's not really manageable. I can manage this. You know, someone said to me, well, occasionally I have this conversation, or can I start the steps whilst I'm still using? Well, you can certainly look into step one. You can certainly get into prayer, and you can certainly look at the message and enjoy the fellowship, and get some support and read the literature. Of course you can. But as regards step work personally, I don't believe you can complete step one until you're sober.
Mm.
The very fact you're not sober shows forth the very fact you've not got a step one. Because if you've got a step one, you've admitted that it's unmanageable. If it's unmanageable, you can't be doing it anymore. Anything else is deception. And some of these are difficult things to swallow, but that's my understanding. You know, I don't know what you think about that, Arthur, while I put up the next reading.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that to get that step one, it took a long time, but for me, it took a lot of delusion to be stripped from me, and I had to be into that place of reasonableness. But I would say that anyone is using and struggling, you know, this absolutely can be done, and there is a life beyond drink and drugs. And I often felt like the fear of quitting drink and drugs was enough to keep me drinking and drugging. You know, what's life going to be like sober? And you know what, life sober is brilliant, excellent. You know, I never really think about drinking drugs now, and when I do, I see the truth in it, and it's usually because I'm talking to someone in active addiction. I'm trying to help them, and again, it's a great reminder of what this stuff does, you know, to us addicts and alcoholics, and
It's quite. I mean,
yeah,
on the topic of control, you know, there's a lot of irony in sobriety, and it says here that we never recover control of drinking. However, we've just read that we're easily able to control our urges to drink and drug. So you won't recover control of drinking and drugging, but you can easily control your desire to drink and drug through an entire psychic change and relationship with God. You know, and you mentioned it. You know, we think we can regain control, and the literature talks about this. And these are deep topics. You could say 1,000 different things about any of these topics, but we talk about the peculiar mental twist, the habit being formed, the thinking of the alcoholic addict, the reasoning when it comes to drink and drugs. And, you know, mind that convinces it will just be one night or one weekend. But the body says there's no way we're having one, you better organise some more, you know, and that one can be 9 months or a year, you know. And, you know, I got that phone call a couple of days ago from a really good lad who'd been on another spree. Pitiful, incomprehensible moral demoralization, you know, and very, very unhappy. What happened? Well, you know, he chose to get high. You know, he wanted the effects produced, and he wanted them without the consequences produced. But he couldn't have the effects produced without the consequences produced. You know, and so when he'd spent up and got in bother and upset folk and ruined his health and his sanity and his flat, you know, he emerges remorseful. You know. Anyway, I brought us to page 30, Arthur, as you can see, more about alcoholism, the delusion that we like other folk has to be smashed, the persistence of this illusion that we can drink like other folk, and obviously this feeds into step 1 as well. We thought we could control our drinking and drugging. It's a progressive illness, and it's been said that an addict alcoholic that doesn't have a daily program of action, once they quit drinking and drugging, they get worse, not better, until they can develop that connection with God and the fellowship and the literature and the steps. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. It just says it right there as well, Paul. You know, I'm glad you brought this page up, because it says there, we learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. So it doesn't matter what, if you're in AA or CA, whatever, you know, fellowship you're in, but this is the first step in recovery. Fully conceding. So I didn't come in here knowing that I was an alcoholic, really. I didn't know what that fully concede, fully surrender to my innermost self, to my gut level, that I'm an alcoholic addict, and this is the first step in recovery. And it took a little while for me to get that. And I don't think I was ever got it. I was sort of given it, you know, by doing this stuff and by wanting to do it, and that willingness to my willingness to have recovery more than I wanted to have drink and drugs. You know, it wasn't just about quitting drink and drugs. It's about wanting sobriety and recovery, permanent sobriety, as you said, Paul. And we never regain control of our drinking, but we can regain we get control of the urge. You know, we can easily control the urge with the power of God, with the power of the program. with the power of our, through our connection to God, fellows, home group and service, and in the grip of a progressive illness.
Absolutely.
Yeah, go on, Paul.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to move on to your topic, your last topic, page 39 in just a moment. I just wanted to say, that none of us are experts and no one's ever practiced a perfect program. So if anyone thinks it sounds idealistic, we want to present the message of hope, faith, and courage that any addict can quit using and drinking and find a new way to live. So that's what we believe. We absolutely believe that. So keep coming to meetings. It is possible to stop drinking and drugging, and it is possible to have a better future. So just very briefly before I go to page 39, Arthur, these real-time phone calls, why did it happen? This has happened, that's happened, why did it happen? And the topic of this podcast is, why do I keep relapsing? We like the effects produced. We have a desire to get high or get low, depending what your drug of choice is. Alcohol is a downer. The drug alcohol is virtually identical to what they use to put you under for an operation. You might be an upper for an hour and a half, but it's a downer. And that's why depression is so closely connected with alcoholism, as is heroin's a downer. Cocaine is an upper. But due to insomnia and psychosis, despair quickly comes with the hangover. But anyway, I digress. The point I'm making is that addicts like getting high, and until they have pleasure and joy in living clean, unfortunately, very often they'll continue to get high. And finding some joy and pleasure in being sober and clean. You mentioned it earlier, Arthur. But elsewhere, it's written that the joy of God is your strength. So in other words, the measure of satisfaction and pleasure you bring to God with your life is the measure of your strength. And in the steps, we ask for the knowledge of God's will. Well, God's will is that I'm happy, harmless, whole, helpful, and humble. That's the will of God for me. It's not secret. The only thing that I need to be those things is power. See? And if I don't have that power, I work steps backwards. I get into my character defects, my shortcomings, the exact nature of my wrongs. I become resentful and fearful, angry and confused and harmful. My willing goes, my faith and trust in the program, steps, fellowship, sponsorship goes. I'm back in step one. And then if I'm not careful, I can convince myself that it is manageable and end up using again. And that's what I see time and time again. So ultimately, the solution for delusion is that ongoing, vital spiritual experience.
Yes, it is. It says a plural, doesn't it? It says, sorry, Paul, what are you saying?
Sorry, go ahead, Arthur. Sorry. Go on.
No, all I was going to say was touch on that. It says the fact is just this, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences, and plural, not one, because I found that my spiritual experience from April this year has an expiry date, and I need to keep having them. I need to keep getting into service, into action, helping others, staying connected to God, and growing in effect, growing in understanding and effectiveness in terms of my relationship to God as well. I've looked for gone back to the religion of my childhood. Now I've gone through the steps a couple of times, and I can see so many similarities between the steps and surrender and the church as well, and obviously the big book, which is the Bible, and I know a lot of the big book was, some of it was taken from or used as a reference from the Bible, and there's that sort of growing and understanding of God is a great thing, and having that deep and effective spiritual experiences, seek them out daily, And I like what you said, I think it was a week or so ago, actually, on a meeting. I hope you don't mind me saying this, but around, you look, it's a great way you said it. You said, we've got to, the day before I'd run out of drugs, I'd always make sure I've got more drugs. But so today I've got to make sure I've got stuff that will most definitely give me a spiritual experience the next day, more spiritual growth the next day, and set that up so the ball keeps on rolling, that spiritual ball keeps on rolling and get into action. The rolling stone gathers no moss, as you say. And I love that. I think that's so true, that we set up these things in the day that are going to bring about and keep us in that fit spiritual condition, by getting into service, a nightly review, morning meditation, prayer, consistent prayer through the day, and reaching out to others and helping others and getting out of self. And that's where those spiritual experiences come from. So yeah, right. So thank you for putting this on, Paul. We've got page 39 we're at. And so it's just talking about this guy, Fred. He's a partner in a well-known accounting firm. It sounds like he's got this idyllic life. His income is good. He has a fine home, happily married, father of children of his promising college age. He has so attractive a personality that he makes friends with everyone. If ever there was a successful businessman, it is Fred. To all appearances, he is a stable, well-balanced individual, yet he is an alcoholic. We first saw Fred about a year ago in a hospital where he'd gone to recover from a bad case of jitters. It was his first experience of this kind, and he was much ashamed of it. Far from admitting he was an alcoholic, he told himself he'd come to the hospital to rest his nerves. Sounds like a bit of spiritual malady, nervous disposition, all that stuff. The doctor intimated strongly that it might be worse than he realised. For a few days he was depressed about his condition, then he made up his mind to quit drinking altogether. It never occurred to him that perhaps he could not do so on his own power. In spite of his character and standing, Fred would not believe himself an alcoholic, much less accept a spiritual remedy from his problem. We told him what we knew of alcoholism. He was interested and conceded that he had some of the symptoms, but he was a long way from admitting that he could do nothing about himself. So I just want to sort of go down a bit further, Paul, as well. And hopefully some people have got their books while they're sort of listening to this podcast. But if you notice on pages 40, 41 and 42, the amount of times that Fred says I, me and my. He's not got, for a start, he's not got a program of action. He doesn't believe he's an alcoholic. He thinks he can do it on his own power. And then over these next few pages, he's talking about what happened, about he had a slip or a relapse. And he was so confident, he thought it could not happen to him. And it's all, I underlined every time he says I think he says I and me and my about 30 or 40 times in 2 pages. So about 30 times, I think it is. And it's just self-centered. And on page 41, it comes to a bit where he says, as I crossed the threshold of the dining room, the thought came to mind that it'd be nice to have a couple of cocktails with dinner. That was all, nothing more. And so he believes an insane thought. He has an insane thought because he's got no power in his life. And, the beautiful thing about this program is, we get in touch with that power, and this stuff doesn't happen as long as we stay in fit spiritual condition. And as soon as I started putting other people first and wasn't so self-obsessed about me and my problems and my all that stuff, when I started putting other people first, God first, others second, and me last, that's when this program really took off for me. And look, days become weeks, weeks become months, and months are soon becoming years. So yeah,
we have to be happy to be sober. It's possible to be happy through connection, home group, service, prayer, meditation, inventory, daily program of action, consistent step work. It's possible to be happy. Ultimately, if you're not happy to be sober and clean, then you'll be happy to be drunk or high. I chose to use again. Every time I picked up again, it was a choice, a personal choice, every time. and I own that today. I've seen folks nearly die because they minimize, maximize, justify, rationalize. I have to take responsibility for my recovery and maintain a fit spiritual condition. The freedom and the joy of sobriety. Sobriety is a wonderful, wonderful thing, Arthur. And it's been a pleasure hearing you this morning, and I want to thank you for coming on the channel and sharing with us your experience today. It's really been most enjoyable, and we absolutely have a solution. So once again, if there's anyone listening to this that's still drinking and drugging, please check out the other broadcasts, come to some meetings, get into these steps. It is a design for living that does work in rough going. It is a bridge to normal living. So with all that being said, Arthur, I'd just like to give ourselves a minute or two to summarize our thoughts. It's been wonderful. Arthur, have you anything you'd like to share with our listeners before we...
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, I would, Paul. And I just want to say thank you for having me on the podcast as always, and all the service you do, and thank you to those who are listening right now, and know that there is a solution, there is a way out. That's what this book was going to be called. They were coming up with a name for it before there was any Alcoholics Anonymous. They came up with a way out, a new dawn, and it says in Vision for You, we trudge the road of happy destiny. Trudge means to walk with purpose. So I hope you're walking with purpose, and that good things will happen when you put in some action, and God is with you, we're with you, and we're all in your corner. If you're listening to this and you're struggling, please get on a meeting, get a sponsor, get a big book, have a spiritual experience that will change, revolutionize your life. It has mine, and God bless you all. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks so much, Arthur. And it's possible to get free. It's possible to stay free. It's possible to go from a daily drug user or alcohol user to being a responsible, productive member of society. So keep on keeping on, family. Stay safe, stay strong. As I've said, stay connected. On the screen just now are some of the Cocaine Anonymous meetings that are on. The ones in green are on every single day. We're part of a group that's on 3 times a day, every day, 2 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9:30 UK times, in that same login meeting ID there. Feel free, bear in mind you can pause and rewind this podcast, take a screenshot of this, so you'll always have access to meetings. On there is the CA UK helpline, Top Dead Centre. cocaineanonymous.org.uk is a phenomenal website where you can find out about face-to-face and online meetings, up and coming events in Britain for Cocaine Anonymous, and also Zoom meetings, lots of Zoom meetings. Also ca.org has lots of great resources on there. And the book we've been reading from today is called Alcoholics Anonymous, often called the Big Book. Our secondary book will be the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. Both those books can be listened to or read 24 hours a day, completely free at aa.org. So without further ado, thanks so much, Arthur.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, and God bless you, everyone, and thank you.
Yeah, stay safe, stay strong, family. Okay, bye-bye.